Hong Kong is Viola Lam, the CEO of that company, Find Solution AI. We also have the tech journalist, Chris Stokel-Walker, who is in the UK. Welcome to both of you. Viola, let me start with you and just a point that's being made. Look, we on the NewsHour, we love tech, okay? This is really exciting. Yeah. But there's a really good point towards the end of that package from Sarah Bolter about how not everybody's face is the same. Different cultures have different ways of moving their bodies, right, and their faces. I'm from Pakistan. So in India and Pakistan, a lot of people, they actually do what in the West is seen as saying no, when they're actually saying, yes, yeah, you're doing it. You're doing exactly that. How does your company's AI make that distinction?
So for us, in order to understand how people learn, so emotion is one of the way in order to see how they respond and if they get stuck. Because for teacher, it's really difficult to understand if do they really understand or do they pretend to be understand. So that's the first thing. So we want to find out the emotion state of the person when they're studying. So we wanted to use this kind of thing in order to motivate them to further to learn more. But for some of the culture, let's say they have different gesture and things, so we will have some calibration underneath. So in different areas, let's say if we work in Hong Kong, we have a library especially working for Hong Kong, but we also have other different libraries if we use it in other areas. But the core thing is, the one that you see on camera, we don't collect any videos. We just do real-time measurement of the muscle itself. We wanted to find out, let's say, if the kid is happy or content, or if they look sad, and what kind of content that it triggers in that way. So at the moment, we're not just working on math. So very soon, and we also have a collaboration with TOEFL as well at the moment. So we're also aiming in order to help more people, especially when they're targeting for their global exam, so we can help them to learn it faster and more easier in a better way.
Okay, I've got so many questions about this, but I'm sure Chris has as well. Let's bring in Chris and then have a discussion between the three of us.
Sure.
What's your overriding feeling about something like this? AI is moving into so many different spheres. Obviously, if it can help education, that's a good thing. Would there be any possible negatives that you can see, Chris, in terms of using AI with young children?
Yeah, there are so many negatives, although it is worth pointing out the positives. One of the difficult challenges of teaching online and interacting in anything like this is that we lose a lot of the non-verbal cues. And so we know that if you can try and pick them up, and what Viola is saying in terms of learning whether kids feel uncomfortable in what they are studying or if it's not going in is good. But having said that, who is to say what one person's sad face is actually a happy face, or the difference is not just in terms of cultures, but in individuals? I think it's very difficult for human beings to manage to interpret how people actually feel just simply from the look on their face. So even trying to get an AI which doesn't have that nuance and that human brain to try and discern these emotions is really quite difficult. So there are lots of ethical issues here, I think, and whenever we talk about children, I know Viola said very carefully there that no video is collected, but there is still data being generated. There is a profile of that child being monitored, and their emotions, their affections, their beliefs are kind of being checked and recorded in some way.
Viola, have you spoken with the parents whose children will be part of this AI way of learning?
Yeah, we have been working with over 90 schools in Hong Kong, especially for mock exam practice for computer science and ICT subject as well. The point is, you need to understand two things. So for a teacher, let's say if you have a class over 30 kids, for a teacher, it's really difficult to help in order to see who is struggling and who needs help. And the core thing is, you cannot really use the human in order to do that. But for us, we're not using it for monitoring, because the core thing is we wanted to know what kind of things that they get stuck so we can help them through. So it's like an AI assistant tools in order to help it. So other than emotion, that part, we also see the learning behavior. Let's say I choose A or I choose B. So we find out the motivation of that person in order to help them to guide them through. So not really monitoring, I think, in that way. And for schools in the past, in Hong Kong, because we have a lot of homework, sorry to say that we have, for a normal kid, if it is in the primary school, they have at least 10 homeworks per day, really quite a lot compared to the rest of the world. But the point is now they use this tool as in order to replace some of the homework. and they really love it. Some of them, they even to ask for more in order to practice, because there's a lot of game element in it in order to make them have fun when they're learning. So for teacher-wise, they have a better feedback, especially they know that the kids is more motivated. Second thing is they also know real-time assessment of that person. Do they need help, or who needs real-time help, that kind of thing. So the teacher can real-time response.
Sure. Chris, is it a case of not really understanding an issue makes people more skeptical about it? I mean, give us a more positive overview of AI and the fields in which it's entering, where you think it's going to make a positive contribution and a difference for the better.
Well, there are loads of different places in which AI is really benefiting things. It is making us more efficient. There are AI companies that are trying to maximize the amount of fuel that is used in the most efficient manner on shipping enterprises. And they do that by looking at, for instance, big geological data, naval data, things about how tides are operating, and they try and chart the best course possible for this. What we have issues with, I think, is when we start to get involved in trying to understand the human. AI is very, very good at reflecting and understanding objects and very strict, obvious things like going from A to B. But when you start to try and unpick the human mind, we've spent hundreds of years trying to do that as human beings, and we've not really succeeded yet. And AI, one of the issues with it is that it always has this bias of whoever is coding it. We always have this issue of, for instance, facial recognition problems, of ethnic minorities being picked up more poorly because of the fact that they are trained on data that looks a lot like me and not a lot like people like George Floyd. So there are these concerns around this stuff, and I think that we should maybe focus on the promises of AI and the things that we know are relatively safe to do and relatively assured that they will do things well, rather than maybe trying to get AI to understand how to necessarily motivate kids when they are not hugely interested in doing that anyway. And that's something that I know my mum was a teacher, a primary school teacher for 40 years. She found it incredibly difficult sometimes to connect with kids and understand what their motivation was for just kind of switching off in the middle of a lesson.
Kids switching off in school. Chris, never. Chris Stokel-Walker and Viola Lamb, thank you both so much indeed. Viola, good luck with your company. Chris, really appreciate your time. Take care.